Welcome back to the deep dive. Our job here is to take the complex, sprawling source material, filter out the noise, and deliver the essential insights tailored just for you, the learner.
Today, we are deep diving into the extraordinary and I think volatile life of one of the most consequential figures in modern Indian politics, Lalu Prasad Yadav.
Consequential is the word. Born in 1948, his career isn't just a biography. It's like a living textbook on the radical social and political transformation of Bihar over the last, 3 decades?
At least. And we're grappling with two, completely contradictory histories here.
Right.
On the one hand, you have the revolutionary populist, the man championed as the Messiah backwards.
And on the other, the politician whose career just became this chronicle of sophisticated, decades-long corruption.
Exactly, resulting in multiple convictions and ultimately his disqualification from office.
So our mission today is to trace this dual narrative. We're going to follow his journey from these incredibly humble roots.
Student politics, yes. All the way through his powerful tenure as Chief Minister of Bihar in the 90s.
And then we'll analyze his unexpected and pretty controversial stint as the Union Minister of Railways.
And finally, we have to dissect the corruption charges. I mean, specifically the Fodder Scam and the Land for Jobs scam, because they just irrevocably shaped his legacy.
Okay, let's unpack this, because to understand the political force she became, you really have to start with that origin story. It's what defined his appeal.
It's the absolute foundation of his entire political identity. He was born on June 11th, 1948, in a village called Fulwaria in Bihar.
And we're talking about a very modest background here.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
He was the fifth of 6 sons. And this poverty, this closeness to the lower strata of society was something he never shed. In fact, he weaponized it.
You see that immediately, right? When he moves to the capital city, Patna.
You do. He went there to live with his older brother, Mukund Rai, who worked as a peon.
A peon, so a low-ranking administrative assistant.
Exactly, at the Bihar Veterinary College. And that detail is so critical. This was not some privileged entry into the state capital.
No.
This was a move of necessity, of family support, but within the absolute lowest rungs of government service.
And Lalu himself worked there eventually, didn't he?
He did. After he got his BA, he worked as a clerk at that same veterinary college. So he was literally starting his political life from the quarters of a lower-grade government employee.
So he could credibly claim to be one of them, not an elite, not a landlord.
But a son of the soil.
Precisely.
Now, his academic path, that was the traditional route for upward mobility, but there were some early signs of, let's say, controversy.
Yes, even then. He matriculated in 1965 from Miller High School in Patna. And interestingly, decades later, when he was in power, he renamed that very school.
Of course he did.
In honor of a local freedom fighter. It shows that early pattern of, rewriting history a bit, institutionalizing his own political narrative.
And his early political training, it wasn't just handed to him. He came up through student activism, and it was rigorous.
Yeah.
From 1970 to 71, he was the general secretary of the Patna University Students' Union, and then he became its president in 73.
And student union politics in Bihar back then was, there was a direct feeder system for state politics. It was intense.
Incredibly competitive. He also earned his LLB, his law degree, in 1976. But let's pause on the academic history, because there's a small but telling little detail in there.
Okay.
It's about his intermediate arts degree, his IA degree. His later affidavit for the Lok Sabha said he got this from BN College in 1966.
What?
Well, 2 things. 1, BN College didn't actually offer that specific course. And 2, the program usually took 2 years to complete. He claimed to have finished it in the same year he enrolled.
So it's a minor point, but it shows an early tendency to maybe craft a record that doesn't quite align with reality.
It's a pattern, yes, an inclination.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting for me. His leap into the national consciousness.
The Bihar movement, 1974. He aligned himself with this monumental socio-political movement led by Jayaprakash Narayan.
The JP movement.
And being associated with the JP movement was basically a national launchpad. It meant he wasn't just some local student leader anymore.
No, he was an anti-establishment voice demanding systemic change.
And that momentum carried him directly into the halls of power. Just 3 years later, in 1977, he was elected to the Lok Sabha.
From Chhapra for the Janata Alliance, he was only 29 years old.
Think about that. The clerk's brother from a tiny village is suddenly one of the youngest members of parliament in the entire country.
But that initial success didn't last long.
It was brief, yes. The Janata Party government fractured, and he lost his re-election bid in 1980. But This forced him to retreat and focus locally, which, in the end, actually strengthened his base.
Right, he served 2 terms as an MLA from Sonpur.
Between 1980 and 1989, this is where he really learned to be a political strategist. He became the leader of the opposition in the Bihar Legislative Assembly by 1989.
So the stage is now set for him to capture state power.
Completely. And by 1990, he recognized and just capitalized on this profound demographic truth, this political vacuum among the lower castes.
He positioned himself as the only genuine leader of the Yadavs.
A critical voting bloc, over 14% of the state. He became their leader and the leader of other marginalized lower castes.
And it wasn't just about consolidating the Yadav vote. There was another critical piece to this puzzle, a tragic one.
The 1989 Bhagalpur violence. The Congress government, which had traditionally enjoyed overwhelming Muslim support, was seen as having utterly failed to protect the Muslim community during these horrific communal clashes.
The result was a catastrophic loss of life and a profound loss of trust.
And the established Muslim vote bank, which had relied on Congress for decades, it shifted its entire allegiance to Lalu.
He was seen as the one who could actually deliver security.
And challenged the established upper caste-dominated political order.
So this new coalition, consolidated Yadav and OBC power, combined with this decisive Muslim mandate, it was an electoral juggernaut.
It was. So when the Janata Dal won the Bihar Assembly elections in 1990, there was this major internal deadlock over who would be chief minister.
Because the national heavyweights were backing different candidates.
Exactly. VP Singh and Chandrasekhar. So Deputy Prime Minister Devi Lal, trying to break the deadlock, he nominated Lalu. He won the internal poll. It was a strategic victory, not a consensus choice.
And his very first major act as chief minister was defining.
Whoa, absolutely. In September 1990, the Ramrath Yatra, led by L.K. Advani, was making its way toward Ayodhya.
A hugely controversial procession.
Immensely. And Lalu, recognizing the political moment and the promises he'd made to his new Muslim voters, ordered Advani's arrest at Samastipur.
That move was politically explosive.
It was transformative. It cemented his credentials as a secular defender of the marginalized. It signaled that he would directly confront the rising tide of Hindu nationalism no matter the cost.
He became a national figure overnight, but his tenure was, I guess, doomed by internal politics and external scrutiny.
Eventually, yes. By 1997, the mounting allegations from the Fodder Scam triggered a leadership revolt within the Janata Dal.
So what did he do?
His response was decisive. He broke away, formed his own party, the Rashtriya Janata Dal, or RJD.
And in a move that screamed dynastic politics, he appointed his wife, Rabri Devi, as the new chief minister.
He did, which takes us directly into part two. The years where he built this enduring identity as the Messiah backwards, using radical populism to reshape society, even if it meant sacrificing governance.
For his opponents, he was just a caricature, right? This chaotic figure presiding over total administrative collapse.
Absolutely. But for the lower castes and Dalits, he was nothing short of a political savior. His identity politics worked because he didn't just talk about poverty. He lived and embodied that rural, non-elite identity.
We've seen studies that illustrate this so perfectly. He was criticized relentlessly for neglecting development roads, electricity, schools.
But a detailed study of the Musar community, one of the poorest social groups in Bihar, showed their overwhelming support for him persisted.
And it wasn't because of new infrastructure.
Not at all. It was because he returned them their ijat, their honor.
This concept of ijat is so foundational to understanding his appeal.
It really is. For generations, these communities weren't just economically marginalized. They were socially subjugated. They were, prohibited from casting their own votes, forced to work in semi-feudal conditions, treated with absolute contempt by upper caste landlords.
So when they say he returned their honor, what they mean is that for the first time, they felt like political equals.
They could walk into a polling booth and cast a vote for who they wanted without fear of immediate reprisal. That sense of dignity, of recognition after centuries of oppression, that often trumped the immediate need for a new road.
And Lalu reinforced this through symbolic policies.
He did. He introduced Charvaha schools. The term Charvaha means a herder or a cowherd.
So these schools were designed specifically for the children of the rural poor.
To give them skilled vocational education, recognizing their traditional occupations, but also offering a pathway out. He also made it a legally cognizable offense for bureaucrats to ignore reservation rules for marginalized communities.
And the political landscape itself was literally inverted during his rule.
Profoundly. By the 1995 assembly elections, legislators from other backward classes, OBCs, made up nearly half the assembly, 49.69%.
And the upper caste legislators.
Their dominance just collapsed. It fell to a mere 17.28%. This wasn't just a political victory. It was a demographic revolution at the ballot box.
But that revolution set up an inevitable confrontation. The political executive is now dominated by the lower castes.
But the state institutions, the judiciary, the police, and especially the bureaucracy remain these entrenched strongholds of the upper castes.
And this is where we get that infamous slogan associated with his time in power. Burable sef karo.
Yes, and it wasn't just a chant. It was, to put it bluntly, a political declaration of war against the old guard.
Let's break down that acronym for our listeners. Burable.
It stands for the four dominant upper castes in Bihar: Bhumihar, Rajput, Brahmin, and Lala or Kayasta.
And Safa Cairo means?
Clean up or remove. It was an unapologetic, confrontational challenge to the existing power structure.
So how did the bureaucracy respond?
They tried to obstruct his OBC empowerment policies. They used institutional mechanisms, filing delays, defying executive orders, leveraging the courts to maintain the status quo.
They saw his rise as the destruction of governance.
And he saw their resistance as the final bastion of upper caste oppression.
So his response was a calculated strategy to just dismantle those bastions.
That's right. His administration frequently transferred officers, especially in key positions.
Right.
They changed recruitment rules to heavily favor the backward castes and systematically placed officials from lower castes into powerful roles like district magistrate or chief secretary.
There's that huge symbolic shift in 1983.
The massive one.
Yeah.
He removed both the Brahmin Director General of Police and the chief secretary, installing lower caste officers in their place.
This leads to a really fascinating academic observation from Jeffrey Witsoe. He argued that the RJD's policy of empowering lower castes often required the deliberate weakening of these state institutions.
Because those institutions were historically controlled by the upper castes.
So wait, you're suggesting the administrative chaos, the dysfunction that critics always point to, it wasn't just incompetence. It was, in part, a strategic byproduct of achieving social justice.
One could argue that, yes. For the RJD, the institutional structure itself was seen as the tool of oppression. If those institutions were weakened, the old guard lost its power to enforce social and economic hierarchies.
He also empowered local strongmen, the Bahubalis.
Men with muscle and political influence, often with criminal records. He brought them into the Janata Dal. He even occasionally dropped cases against Naxalite leaders who were fighting against the landlord class.
Which created this incredibly volatile political environment. Social justice was being achieved through extra-institutional, sometimes even illegal means.
It fundamentally transformed the nature of governance in the state.
Let's talk about the incredible symbolism he used. He rejected every convention of an elite chief minister.
His whole image was intertwined with the rural, non-elite experience. His self-identification as the son of a poor Gowala, a herder, wasn't just a phrase, it was a performance.
The famous Kurta Fa Holi, the clock-tearing Holi festival.
A spectacle of raw, untamed camaraderie. Participants would shout familiar, abusive calls at him like, "Where is the bloody Lalu hiding?" And he would embrace it, responding in kind.
That kind of intentional vulgarity, that nonconformity, it instantly sets him apart from the sophisticated English-speaking politicians in Delhi.
It tells his base, I am one of you. I reject their norms. His political rallies, always called Raya, were themselves these choreographed symbols of plebeian masculinity.
And he encouraged attendees to carry the lathi.
The robust stick used by herders, the lathi became a symbol of rural strength, of discipline, and a quiet threat of resistance.
He used the symbolism masterfully against the rise of Hindu nationalism. In 2003, the VHP was distributing trishul's.
The three-pronged spear, a militant religious symbol. So Lalu organized a massive rally at Gandhi Maidan.
And what was his message?
He directly challenged them. He asked his rural supporters to bring their lathis to the rally. He declared that the lathi, the weapon of the weak, would destroy the trishul of hatred. He framed it as a class struggle. The poor farmer's stick versus the militant elite's trident.
And the atmosphere at these rallies was something else. Take the huge 1996 Garib rally, the rally of the poor.
The logistics were staggering. They provided free transportation for attendees to get to Patna.
And eyewitness accounts describe this intentional appeal to non-urban tastes.
Exactly. Near the railway station, there was organized entertainment, including a Randi Kanach, a dance performance by a professional female dancer, arranged specifically for the rural attendees. It just underscores his total refusal to cater to polite upper-class sensibilities.
And this commitment to the grassroots wasn't just theater. It extended to actual political appointments.
We see examples like the election of Muni Rajak, a Dalit woman from the Dobi, or washerman, caste, to the Legislative Council in 2022.
Or Remvrikesh Sada, the RJD MLA who claimed to be the poorest MLA in Bihar.
He lived in subsidized housing, had very little cash. He claimed Lalu's family actually provided the funds for him to contest the election. Elevating the genuinely impoverished served as this constant reminder to his voters that he was turning the traditional social hierarchy upside down.
And this had a real, tangible impact on elections.
A profound one. Lalu's rule broke the traditional patron-client voting relationship where upper-caste landlords just told Dalits how to vote.
He moved polling stations away from upper-caste villages.
And into lower-caste localities. He ensured that Dalits could exercise their franchise without physical coercion. So they may not have gotten a new road right away, but they gained political freedom and dignity. That dignity, that Ijat, formed an unbreakable bond of loyalty to him.
A loyalty that allowed him to weather a lot of storms, including the early stages of the Fodder Scam.
It did.
Now we have to transition from the state-level social revolutionary to the national stage. After transforming Bihar, Lalu Prasad Yadav took the reins of the world's fourth-largest railway network.
Following the 2004 general election, where he won both the Chhapra and Madhepura seats, he became the Minister of Railways in the new UPA government, a crucial portfolio he held until 2009.
And his tenure was immediately marked by his trademark populist initiatives. He froze passenger fares.
Which, in India, where millions of poor and middle-class citizens rely on the railways, was a massive political win.
He also focused on improving conditions for the poorest passengers. He put cushion seats in all the unreserved compartments.
A small thing that meant a lot, prioritizing comfort and dignity for the common traveler.
And then there was the famous Kulhar initiative. He banned plastic cups for tea at railway stations.
And mandated their replacement with traditional biodegradable pottery cups, or kulhars. The intention was genuinely populist, to create huge employment for rural potters.
But it failed.
It failed miserably. Logistical nightmares, sanitation issues, higher costs. It was a beautiful idea rooted in rural nostalgia that just couldn't survive the realities of high-volume railway logistics.
But the defining narrative of his time in Delhi was the spectacular turnaround story of the Indian Railways.
This was huge. When he took charge, the organization was losing money. By the time he left, he claimed a cumulative profit, or surplus, of a staggering 38,000 crore. That's about $4.5 billion.
This story captured the global imagination. Here's this rustic politician who barely speaks English, achieving what elite bureaucrats couldn't.
He got invitations from 8 Ivy League schools, including Harvard and Wharton, to lecture on management. He would address PAX halls, often delivering his talks entirely in Hindi.
He became this unlikely business guru. The turnaround was even made a case study by the Indian Institute of Management.
The image was transformed. He wasn't just a regional populist, he was a global financial wizard.
But the whole narrative was challenged as soon as he left office.
Immediately and decisively. His successor and opposition parties alleged that the surplus was purely the result of creative, politically motivated financial statement manipulation.
So how did they do it? How did they manipulate the numbers?
It all came down to accounting definitions. The 2011 Comptroller and Auditor General, the CAG, report, it endorsed the skeptical view. It found that the overall performance of the railways, measured by traditional operational efficiency, had actually declined marginally during the later years of his tenure.
So the trains weren't running better. The profit must have come from just moving numbers around.
Exactly. The key finding was that the reported surplus was calculated by redefining what a profit was. His ministry included 2 categories that were previously excluded from the net surplus figures.
Which were?
First, cash and investable reserves, and second, money that was legally set aside for depreciation and capital expenditure.
That's a huge difference. You're including money that's already earmarked for future expenses, or is just sitting in reserve and calling it profit.
It was brilliant political theater, managing the perception of success. But the underlying institutional health of the railways hadn't experienced any miracle. It was an accounting illusion, designed to secure a powerful political narrative.
So he used his time in the national spotlight to refine his own image, to counter the criticism he faced back in Bihar. But that reputation was built on sand.
It was.
And that manufactured success brings us to the inevitable part 4. The pervasive shadow of corruption and the lengthy judicial process that ultimately ended his political career.
The extent of the allegations is vast, but the two main scandals, the Fodder Scam and the Land for Jobs scam, are the focus. And Lalu holds the dubious distinction of being one of the first major politicians to lose his parliamentary seat immediately upon conviction.
Let's start with the Fodder Scam. It started dominating Bihar politics back in 1996. What was the central mechanism of this fraud?
The Fodder Scam involved the systematic fraudulent withdrawal of colossal sums, about $4.50 billion, over $111 million from the Animal Husbandry Department.
And how did it work?
The money was supposedly withdrawn to buy food, medicine, and equipment for cattle, but the transactions were purely paper-based, non-existent companies claiming to supply non-existent goods.
A completely fake supply chain with actual public funds just being siphoned off.
And it was deeply embedded in the state machinery. The initial revelation came after a raid on the Chaibasa treasury exposed these massive, unexplained financial flows. Lalu ordered a state inquiry.
But a public interest litigation forced the Bihar High Court to intervene.
Right. They recognized the scope of the fraud was beyond the state's capacity to investigate itself. And their decision to hand the investigation to the Central Bureau of Investigation, the CBI, was the beginning of the end for his time as chief minister.
Because the CBI filed a charge sheet in 1997, naming him as a primary accused,
Which forced his resignation and led to the controversial appointment of his wife, Rabri Devi. The cases were later transferred to Ranchi in the new state of Jharkhand.
we need to convey the sheer magnitude of this. We're not talking about one conviction. We're talking about a pattern of institutional theft across different treasuries, proven in multiple courts.
That's the key takeaway, the pattern. He's been convicted in 5 distinct cases within this Fodder Scam web. The first major conviction came in 2013 from the Chaibasa Treasury. He got 5 years in jail.
And that 2013 conviction was the one that immediately got him disqualified as a sitting MP for 6 years. It ended his ability to hold elected office.
Correct. And the convictions just kept piling up. In 2017, the second case from the Diogar Treasury. In 2018, the fourth case from the Dumka Treasury, where he got 2 separate consecutive 7-year sentences.
Wow. 2 separate sentences for one case.
Under different acts, yes. The Indian Penal Code and the Prevention of Corruption Acts. It just highlights the severity of his culpability.
And the final one, the 5th case, came in 2022.
In 2022, he was found guilty of illegal withdrawals of a massive 139.35 crore from the Duranda Treasury, another 5-year jail term. It shows that the institutional forces we discussed earlier, the upper caste-dominated judiciary and central agencies, were really the only things capable of overcoming his populist government.
And despite all these sentences, he was granted bail in April 2021.
On medical grounds, yes. But the legal reality is he remains disqualified from seeking or holding office for 6 years after his release. He's sidelined.
Okay, now let's pivot to the second major scandal, the Land for Jobs scam. This one is significant because it's from his time as Union Railway Minister and directly involves his family.
The core charge here is almost textbook corruption. Lalu and his family illegally acquired valuable prime real estate as a bribe, a quid pro quo, for corruptly awarding railway contracts during his tenure.
And the mechanism was pretty sophisticated.
Very. It moved beyond simple cash. They used shell companies to disguise the property transfers. For example, a company called Delight Marketing were involved, and it was later renamed Lara Properties.
And what did this company facilitate?
It facilitated the transfer of incredibly valuable land to his family. A property meant for the Saguna Moor Mall, worth tens of millions of dollars, was transferred to his wife, Rabri Devi, and his sons, Tejashwi and Tej Pratap.
So wealth channeled directly through corporate facades into the hands of the minister's family.
A different shell company, AB Exports, was used to transfer a prime property worth about 40 crore to his children, Tejashwi, Rajini, and Chanda Singh.
But here's the most damning detail, right?
This is it. The property, worth tens of millions, was transferred for a laughably nominal price of just $400,000.
$400,000. That price difference alone is shocking. It's undeniable proof of a massive bribe disguised as a sale.
And the Enforcement Directorate, the ED, has since attached these properties trying to reclaim the illegally acquired assets.
And beyond these 2 huge corruption threads, there have been others. The disproportionate assets case in 1998.
Which he and Rabri Devi were acquitted of in 2006, yes. And then there was that truly bizarre allegation in 2017, the Patna Zoo's soil scam.
This one was strange.
The allegation was that soil excavated from the basement of the Saguna Moor Mall the one from the Land for Jobs scam, was illegally sold to the Patna Zoo for 90 lakh without any proper tenders.
And this happened while his son, Tej Pratap, was the environment minister, the department that controls the zoo.
Now, the Bihar government later dismissed some of the evidence, but the persistent presence of these allegations, from massive institutional fraud to petty, localized influence peddling, it just defines the administrative perception of his era. The populism always ran parallel to the pervasive charges of personal enrichment.
Okay, we've traced the social revolution and the corruption. Now let's move to part 5. Reconciling the legacy of Lalu Prasad Yadav and the impact of this dual identity on Bihar's political landscape.
His rule fundamentally changed the social contract, but it inevitably drew massive criticism. Opponents coined the term Yadavization.
A broad accusation that he had simply replaced upper caste hegemony with Yadav caste hegemony.
Working almost exclusively for their benefit. But that claim of preferential economic benefit, it's complicated by some surprising data.
Because if political power translated directly into wealth, the Yadavs should have seen a rapid economic uplift.
But a 2011-2012 report found a critical contradiction. The average per capita income for Yadavs was actually among the lowest for the major OBC groups. It was dramatically lower than upper castes like Brahmins, who were earning more than double, or even other agrarian castes like Kurmis and Kushwahas.
Which suggests that political power, the ajat, the dignity, did not translate proportionally into immediate economic gains for the entire caste.
Exactly. Their political assertiveness shifted the social order, but the upper castes still retained a vice grip on the upper echelons of the bureaucracy and the dominant economic structures.
This is the complex trade-off of his legacy. While he gave the poor a political voice, critics focused heavily on the dire state of law and order.
The perception of administrative collapse was widespread. A marked rise in kidnapping, extortion, the proliferation of private armies engaging in intense caste wars.
And this was the dark shadow of his populist strategy. By empowering Bahubalis and offering tacit support to Naxalite groups fighting the landlord class.
He was prioritizing immediate social revolution and political freedom for his base over maintaining rigorous state control. It was chaotic, yes, but for many Dalits and lower castes, the collapse of upper caste coercion in elections was worth the heightened insecurity. They exchanged a certainty of social subjugation for a chaotic but free existence.
And we have to include the enduring issue of nepotism and dynasticism. His career set the precedent, starting with his wife, Rabri Devi, becoming CM, and continuing with his children, Misa Party, Tej Pratap, and Tejashwi Yadav, all entering politics.
And his political influence, even while in jail, has remained staggering. In the 2015 Bihar Assembly elections, his party, the RJD, emerged as the single largest party. They formed the Mahagabandhan, or Grand Alliance government, with Nitish Kumar's JDU.
An alliance of anti-BJP forces that proved incredibly fragile, specifically because of the corruption allegations still hanging over the family.
Exactly. In 2017, the pressure became too great. The ED and the CBI lodged criminal cases tied to the Land for Jobs scam against his son, Tejashwi Yadav, who was Deputy Chief Minister.
So Nitish Kumar resigned.
He resigned, abandoned the RJD, and immediately rejoined the BJP-led alliance, citing corruption as the primary reason.
But the RJD's base held. In 2020, they were again the single largest party. And the political pendulum swung back in 2022 when Nitish Kumar temporarily rejoined them, and Tejashwi returned as Deputy CM.
But that alliance fractured again in 2024 when Nitish, citing the same corruption cases, returned to the BJP fold. The final data point we have shows the RJD hitting a record low of just 25 seats in the 2025 Bihar elections, showing that pendulum continues to swing sharply against them.
So we've seen the full complex arc. He's a politician who fundamentally dismantled the social hierarchies of one of India's largest states, challenging upper caste dominance through radical, charismatic populism, often at the cost of administrative integrity.
His legacy is defined by this social upheaval. He delivered dignity and political freedom, that precious ijat to millions who had never known it. Yet this achievement is tragically and inextricably linked to administrative collapse, the weakening of state institutions, and a pervasive decades-long pattern of high-profile corruption convictions.
And the Land for Jobs scam in particular illustrates how the political power meant to uplift the marginalized was almost immediately converted into immense illegal personal wealth for his family through shell companies.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? The story of Lalu Prasad Yadav highlights the profound, often tragic trade-offs in democratic politics, especially in a deeply unequal society. we see the explosive power of identity politics to grant freedom and honor to excluded masses.
Yet we also see the crippling cost when established institutional structures, the checks and balances designed to prevent fraud, are intentionally subverted in the name of that revolution.
It raises a crucial question about how we, or how history, should ultimately weigh a leader's contribution. If a charismatic leader successfully grants political dignity and voting freedom to oppressed masses, but simultaneously fails spectacularly on the metrics of development and clean governance, how should their tenure be judged?
Is political empowerment for the marginalized sufficient to define success, or must development and clean administration remain the only true measure of progress? Is dignity without development a temporary victory?
It's a profound conflict of values, and it's something for you to mull or explore on your own.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the dual history of Lalu Prasad Yadav.
We look forward to having you next time.